All right. Cool. Cool. Hello. First, yes. Wow, you're probably there before I was. Hello, everyone. My name is Wesley. This is Woo Can Cook. If this is your first time tuning in, we're here every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday at 6:30 PST, and Wednesdays at 6 p.m. PST. If you are tuned in before, welcome back. Today I'm making a crispy bacon fried rice that I have done many times on these streams. This is one of my favorite fried rices of all time, mostly because it kind of just avoids all of the major pitfalls that you will very, very frequently come across when trying to make fried rice at home, which is that fried rice involves a large number of ingredients. So if you try and do it in a wok the entire way, you're going to run into problems if you don't navigate batch cooking very carefully. So there are a couple of ways to do it. My favorite way of doing it is the way that we're going to do it today, which is using a cast iron pan for a good portion of it. So we're going to do part of it in the cast iron pan. We're going to start it off in our wok and then move over to our cast iron pan. Actually, we're going to start it in the cast iron pan, then move it over to the wok, and then go back to the cast iron pan. So we have a couple of pans sitting over on the stove right now, so you can take a look. Right now is my wok over here. We're going to be starting off on our cast iron pan and then moving back over shortly after. So we're going to be using both quite a bit today, and I'm going to explain why. That's actually going to be really useful. So if you have any questions for me, feel free to drop your questions in the chat. I don't know everything about fried rice or wok cooking or cast iron cooking or anything really, but I know lots of stuff, so hopefully I can be helpful or informative, or at the very least hopefully just entertaining to watch. I know lots of people just like to watch me chop stuff, so if you want to do that, you can totally just do that too. I know folks like to just watch and tune out and just watch me chop stuff, which is also fun to do. So, as with pretty much everything that I cook on stream, there's also a recipe video that goes along with what we're cooking today. Those recipe videos, they always live over on my YouTube channel, so if you haven't hopped over to the YouTube channel, definitely do that, because there's lots of fun recipes that come up. Those are out every Friday, so last Friday we came up with a new recipe for a Taiwanese popcorn chicken, which was hacking the popcorn chicken that you'll find at Quickly's Boba Tea here in the States. That was part of a larger series that I've been doing, hacking a lot of Americanized Chinese foods that you come across. That's actually Taiwanese food, to be more specific. But we've been hacking a lot of Americanized Chinese and just generally Asian foods, and kind of taking a look at those really, really iconic Americanized dishes that you find in Chinese American cuisine, things like General Tso's chicken, honey sesame chicken, stuff like that, and seeing what it looks like if we were to approach it with a more traditional lens. So that's always super fun with dishes that anytime that they involve fried chicken, because a lot of the dishes that you find fried chicken in the Chinese cuisine are not really Chinese at all. They're really just American. So for example, honey sesame chicken is really just honey glazed chicken with a couple of things added. So it's very interesting to take a look at that through the lens of traditional wok cooking, because none of those things actually come from Chinese cuisine. So if you're interested in stuff like that, definitely hop over to the YouTube. That's also where the concurrent live stream lives. That would be the laptop behind me. Lots of fun folks popping up over there. Those over on that YouTube channel, that's where all of the schedule of everything that I'm going to be streaming lives. So if you want to know in advance what I'm going to be cooking, you can find that all over there. There's also a list of all of the ingredients that go in the things that I'm cooking. So if you're really committed and you really want to, you can pick up the things that I'm going to be, that go into the things that I'm cooking, and you can cook along with me, which some folks have started doing. So, let's get into it. Okay, oh, that's a good username. What kind of knife am I using? Yeah, today I'm using, this is a French chef's knife, which I'm positive I'm saying wrong, but it's called a Père Noir Nogent, and it's a vintage French chef's knife. I believe it's from the 70s or so. Probably the more popular version of this knife that you'll find. It has this very same profile and shape. It's probably consistent with most chef's knives that come from like French cooking, where it's like a little bit longer and slimmer than a standard like German 8-inch Wurststoff. And probably the more famous version is the French Sabatier, which you can find, and that one is actually still in production. I don't think you'll be able to find this knife because it's vintage, and I don't think it's in production anymore. But the Sabatier is still in production, so if you're looking for a knife like this, go and find the Sabatier, and I think you can actually get it for relatively cheap too. So. Oh, you made it. Oh, Sarah, you made it using a cast iron pan. That's cool. Yeah. Yeah, this is one of my favorites. Sarah, I got your message about egg rolls too. I'm actually going to take a shot at that. I've been making egg rolls since I was a kid. We do that every year for like Chinese New Year. Not this year because we didn't do Chinese New Year this year. But yeah, egg rolls is going to be super fun. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to do egg rolls and lumpia, and then we can take a look at the differences. Which, as far as I know, I actually don't know what the difference is between egg rolls and lumpia. Maybe just the size. Cool. So that's our ginger and garlic. Those are going to go into our wok fry very, very first. In a lot of recipes, you'll see garlic and ginger referred to as aromatics. It's because obviously they are very, very aromatic. So we're going to throw them in very first and bloom out their aromatic qualities. So that works very well as like going into the wok fry super, super early because when aromatic ingredients make contact with hot oil, they release a lot of fragrant flavor. So super, super useful in wok fries because it kind of establishes that baseline layer of umami. So as we stack and build on top of all of these layers of umami that we're going to be building, so we're going to be using like rice vinegar today and soy sauce especially. We're also using sambal olek, where there's going to be some hoisin sauce that's going to come up. All of these things, they're dealing with like in the flavors of umami, and we're going to be setting the stage. You could think of it as like building blocks by establishing very, very first ginger and garlic. Today, I don't always use green onions, but today I am using green onions, and anytime that you see me, well, not anytime, but very, very frequently when you see me using green onions, I'll be separating them, so that is just gonna keep happening, by the way. New camera, and I have not figured out how to turn off the shutter. The auto shutter closed, so that's just gonna keep happening every 30 minutes. Yeah, so anytime that we're dealing with green onions, or very, very frequently when I'm dealing with green onions, I like separating them. These are going to be the whites, which are a little bit more durable, so we can throw them in with our wok fry. But when we're dealing with the greens of our green onions, you'll notice that they're a little bit more leafy and not quite as durable. So in order to make sure that they don't fall apart, or you could even throw them into the wok fry, and it will probably be just fine. It will probably just disappear, actually. But in order to get a little bit more flavor out of them, what I like doing is slicing them up and then reserving them as a garnish for the very, very end. So they're actually not even going to get cooked. And that works really well because the greens of your green onions are super, super delicate. So if we want to reserve, or want to make sure that they actually taste like something, you can save them and throw them in raw at the very end of a dish. I don't always do that, but super, super often you will see me doing that. If I am actually throwing green onions into a wok fry, most often I'll probably be chopping it really, really large. So I do that. I did that most recently. I think I did that in my Mongolian beef recipe, which specifically calls for very, very large planks of green onions. So I think they're like chopped like an inch long or so. And the reason that we do that is so by chopping them really large, it makes sure that they don't fall apart in the wok fry. But in this case, we're just going to be using it as a garnish. So I'm slicing it on bias pretty thin, and that's going to go in at the very, very end. Yeah. Ginsu. Oh, no, I do have a Ginsu, actually, so this is... where's my Ginsu? Ah, here's the Ginsu. Ginsu looks more like this. Ginsu is a Japanese knife. And in my opinion, it actually looks... Ginsu is more similar to the shape and profile of a Wurststoff. Which is like a little bit shorter, like a little bit fatter. This is probably the knife profile that you'll come across most often in restaurants or like in home cook kitchens a lot. is like this general shape. Generally, I see most often either the Ginsu or Wusthof knives. That's because they're just like really popular, or like were really popular in like the early 2000s, and they're also really well made. So they're just like floating around all the time. So the main difference that you'll notice though between a Ginsu and the I guess you would refer to this as a sabatier. This is actually a père noir, but a sabatier, you'll notice that it's much longer and much thinner. So it has like this thinner, longer profile, which kind of gives it, like, I guess like for me it's like I feel like I have a little bit more control over the knife. But yeah, totally. The other thing, the most important thing that I'll mention anytime we bring up knives is that the most important thing about your knife that you need to make sure is that it's really sharp. As long as it's really sharp, you don't need a fancy knife, you just need a really sharp knife. And making sure that your knife is sharp does not cost a lot of money. Just get yourself a good whetstone that's probably like 20 bucks. And after that, you're going to be in good shape. You don't need to drop 300 bucks on super fancy knives, because even a super fancy knife will eventually go dull. So yeah, before I found this knife, which I actually got for pretty cheap because I got it at this state sale, I used to use like a really cheap what kind of knife is it? I forget what kind of knife it is. One of the cheap ones that you find at Costco, and there's nothing fancy about it, but it was really sharp because I did have a really nice whetstone. So as long as you have that really nice sharp knife, then you don't really need to worry too much about spending oodles and oodles of money on a fancy knife. Hermina, yeah, how's it going? Yeah, Miss Jessa, yeah, how's it going? You're on YouTube. Is this on? It is also on Reddit though, yes. So we're streaming to both actually. Hello to everyone just tuning in. I guess I should introduce myself. My name is Wesley. This is Woo Can Cook. Jessa, to answer your question, we are streaming to both Reddit and YouTube. So if you're looking, you can tune in on either platform. Both of them are really good. We're here streaming every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday at 6:30, and Wednesdays at 6 p.m. PST. With new recipes, those come out over on the YouTube channel every Friday. So if you haven't hopped over to the YouTube channel and subscribed over there, I definitely recommend it. We're working our way to 2,700 subscribers by the end of the month. So if you want to help us hit that subscriber goal, that's a fun place to be, because you can help us hit that goal. In addition to the concurrent live streams, so lots of folks watching over on YouTube already, that's also where all of my recipe videos live. So if you're looking to figure out how to cook everything that I cook on these streams, that's probably the first place that you should go. If not that, probably the website. Actually, I always forget about the website. But all of those recipes, they live over on my YouTube channel. So in those recipe videos, they tend to move a little bit slower, and we kind of talk our way through some of the decision making that goes behind a lot of the recipes, and why I do certain stuff in recipes, why I leave certain things out, things like that. So if you haven't yet, definitely check out the YouTube channel. Lots of fun stuff going on over there. We have a couple of series that are in progress right now. Probably the most recent one that I added to actually is our Chinese American Hacks series, in which I've been deconstructing a lot of Chinese American classics, so things like General Tso's chicken, honey sesame chicken, kung pao chicken, stuff like that, and kind of taking a look at what those dishes would look like if they didn't contain so many Americanized influences. So how would it look if I were to reimagine General Tso's chicken in the lens of like really traditional Chinese cooking? So, kind of like takes some knowledge about like traditional wok cooking and applies it to really Americanized Chinese cooking, and see what that looks like. But today we're doing a bacon fried rice, which is one of my favorites. Today we're going to be using one of my favorite techniques for cooking fried rice at home, which is essentially avoiding the use of the wok as much as possible. So we're actually going to be using both a wok and a cast iron pan. And kind of, so probably the big problem that a lot of folks will run into when cooking fried rice at home is going to be low heat retention, because fried rice contains a lot of ingredients. So anytime that you have a dish that has a lot of stuff going on in a wok, you're going to end up with issues with retaining heat in the wok because you're going to have trouble keeping it hot because there's going to be so many things in the wok. So there are a couple of solutions to that. Probably the most common one is batch cooking. But one of my favorite techniques about approaching a fried rice by making sure that it doesn't turn into mush is using a cast iron pan, because a cast iron pan has extremely high heat retention, which means that we will be able to sear it, which is going to give us that really, really crispy texture. So we're going to crisp up our bacon and then crisp up our rice at the very, very end. And that's going to give the crispiness to our crispy fried rice. But before we get to that, we're chopping up some veggies. So that's our carrots all set. We're going for a pretty small dice here. If you want, you can also, it's super common in fried rices too, especially, to use frozen carrots. So if you want, you can also totally use frozen carrots. I am going to be using frozen peas, actually, so that will come up very, very often in a lot of fried rices. The main reason that I use fresh carrots is because I have fresh carrots on hand all the time. So. Let's see, next up, before we get to our meats, I'm going to assemble our sauce here. The sauce for our fried rice today is actually pretty simple because there's not a lot of stuff that goes into it because I don't think you need that much stuff. I'm starting off, that's 4 tablespoons of soy sauce, followed by 2 tablespoons of hoisin sauce. We need 2. And then next up is let's see, we need 2 tablespoons of sambal olek. I'm going from memory today because I have never actually written this recipe down. Actually, I written it down once. So this is 2 tablespoons of sambal olek, and then a single tablespoon of rice vinegar. Potato, yeah, you would have used them frozen. Yeah, so it's super, super common to use frozen veggies in a fried rice for a couple of reasons. Definitely with peas, it works really, really well to use frozen peas for the specific reason that if you were to use like canned peas, for example, which I have done all the time, I've used canned peas in fried rice all the time, is that they're going to turn mushy over time. So those peas, they actually don't need to cook at all. So super, super often when you're making fried rice, you'll see the use of frozen veggies. And that's because they're essentially going to defrost during the cook time. So today we're using frozen peas and fresh carrots. So here's where are my frozen peas? So these are the peas that we'll be using today. They are like rock hard frozen. Like I literally just pulled these out of the freezer. And they need to be ice cold because otherwise, if they defrost, if they're already defrosted once they go into the wok, they're going to cook and then you're going to have mushy peas. So in order to make sure that we have crispy peas instead of defrosted or like mushy peas, we need those to be like completely crisped up and like solid. So super, super often in fried rices you will see the use of frozen veggies. Not because it's cheaper, although it is cheaper, but because we need it to defrost during the cook so that they're not cooking. Otherwise we'll end up with mushy peas. I found that it works out okay to use fresh carrots though, because carrots are so durable that they will withstand wok heat without problem. All right, so that's our sauce. Next up is our chicken. So today I'm using chicken breast. So if you've tuned into these streams before, I talk about this a lot. But very, very often you'll see me using chicken thigh as opposed to chicken breast for no real reason other than super, super often the real reason that I'm using chicken thigh instead of chicken breast is because it happens to be what defrosted quicker. But for this particular version, we actually do specifically want to be using chicken breast. And that's because we need this chicken. There's already going to be quite a bit of fat involved since we're adding bacon. So anytime that you see me adding extra fat from another source, like bacon, for example, I will generally hold off on adding extra fat from chicken thigh, which is probably going to be a lot more fatty than chicken breast because it has more fat content. So the leaner cut of a chicken breast, like what we're using today, is going to be more appropriate for a fried rice that contains bacon, because we're already going to have quite a bit of fat to contend with from our thick cut bacon, which we're going to be getting to in a moment. So in order to make sure that our fried rice isn't overwhelmed with fat, we're going to avoid chicken thigh today and go with a leaner chicken breast instead. But I will also say, if all you have is chicken thigh, just use the chicken thigh and it will work just fine. That's like the general ethos of how fried rice works, is use what you have. Fried rice is intended to be meant for leftovers, so whatever it is that you have on hand, you should just use that. It'll work. So that's our chicken breast. I'm going to do a really simple marinade on our chicken breast today because there's already quite a bit of salt and seasoning going on in our sauce. This is going to be just 2 tablespoons of soy sauce and a 1/4 teaspoon of white pepper. Maybe even a little bit less. A couple of folks have asked me about what kind of soy sauce to use and how to, like, I guess this is actually a pretty important caveat to a lot of my recipes. But pretty much any time that you see me using soy sauce, especially in any of the written recipes that I've done, I'm almost always using low sodium soy sauce. And I just found that it is a little bit easier to use. You can be a little bit more aggressive with it without like over seasoning. So if you're following one of my recipes and you notice that it's too salty, I would say start by halving the soy sauce if you're using full sodium soy sauce. I've noticed that that's been a problem for a couple people, so. We're actually not done cutting meat. Ooh, what was the last thing that I added to the sauce? Ooh, good question, actually. The last thing that I added, I just threw the jar out. But it is a chili oil, I think, like most commonly referred to as like fried chili crisp, something like that. This jar says fried chili in oil, which means nothing. I don't know. I don't know. Oh, is the mic cracking? Yeah, it does that. Yeah, I don't know. I see like the translation for Lao Gan Ma change all the time, and it kind of goes back and forth, and I actually don't know what people refer to it as. But in Chinese, the Chinese name for it is called Lao Gan Ma. And what is it essentially is a red chili flake that's fermented in chili oil, and that oil it's really useful in a lot of like sauces because it's essentially a chili crisp that's coated in oil. So that oil, because it is so oily, has an ability to distribute throughout a sauce really well because of its oil. So unlike the other source of spiciness that we added is going to come from our sambal olek today. But sambal olek, unlike Lao Gan Ma, is not coated in oil, so it won't quite spread throughout a dish in the same way that Lao Gan Ma will. So I love using it in a lot of sauces because that oily quality has a way of like cutting through a dish and kind of spreading throughout. And it's not like super aggressive, so you can use it in larger quantities, and it works really well. I think in the original recipe that I had written, which is up on the YouTube channel, I don't think that that's in there. I just happen to have like a couple of like tablespoons left in that jar, so I just wanted to use it up. So optional, but definitely worth it if you happen to have it on hand. Yeah, Lao Gan Ma, yeah, exactly. Which I believe the translation of that actually translates to old grandma, something like that. Something grandma, I think old grandma. So the way that you can tell is because there's an actual grandma in the jar, this is the one that you're looking for. So when you go to Chinese markets, you'll see the like old godmother. That's it, yeah. So we're looking for this old lady. She makes the best sauce. So and you'll find anytime that you're at a Chinese market, you'll probably find a couple different versions of this sauce. But the one that you're looking for is the one with the actual old lady on it. You mixed it, oh yeah, into a fried rice and it's real nice, yeah. Really good on eggs too. Really anything like you would put hot sauce on. because it has that oily quality. So I love eating it on fried eggs because it kind of like spreads throughout the egg, and it will mix in, especially on an over easy egg, because it will mix into the yolk really well. Really, anything that you can imagine using. Imagine anything that you can imagine using hot sauce on. So I just finished chopping up. That was some thick cut bacon. I love using thick cut bacon. You'll probably, if you've watched one of these streams before, you'll see me. I have raved about thick cut bacon a lot. But anytime that I use bacon, I'm generally going to be using thick cut bacon because it has a lot more fat content. So we're going to be using that fat in order to build out our sauce. Now is this mic cutting out again? Check. Yeah, it's probably coming in and out. All right. Yeah, I don't always know how to fix that. Sometimes so if you're watching on Reddit, sometimes the Reddit mic, it comes in and out. And that's because it's a really old mic, so we could actually take a look. It's this mic. I think it's actually made in the 80s. So it's a piece of crap. But there's a nicer mic. If it is still cutting out, you can hop over to the YouTube channel. The YouTube stream has a nicer mic on it, which does not cut out nearly as much, so I've heard. So if it is still cutting out, definitely hop over to the YouTube channel. It'll probably fix it. But if not, it's going to be... we're working on fixing that. Over on the YouTube channel, we're also crowdfunding for some donations to help replace this stupid mic because it keeps cutting out. So if you want to help us replace that mic, hop over to the YouTube channel and check out that. Oh, Paul, yeah, how's it going, Paul? Oh man, there's so many people over on YouTube. This is the first time you've noticed that I'm left-handed. Yeah, generally everyone notices that I'm left-handed. I'm actually surprised. All right. Let's hop over and start rendering some bacon. So over on my stove, I have a cast iron pan and it is ice cold. We want a very, very cold pan for this to work. So what we're going to do is we're going to drop our bacon into this cold pan, and then I'm going to bring the temperature of the pan up with the bacon in it. So that's super, super important. That bacon has to be in the pan while it comes up to temperature. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to render the fat. So what we're looking for here is, you'll notice with our bacon, there's all of this white element going on. So everything that's white, that's all fat. So it's super, super important. This bit right here, that's all bacon fat. So what's going to happen is as the temperature of the cast iron pan starts coming up, all of that fat is going to render into a liquid form. So it's going to render into liquid bacon fat. And then what we're going to do is that we're going to use that fat to like sort of build out the layers of flavor in our cast iron pan, and then sort of like build the flavor of our bacon fried rice from there. So super, super important. Whenever I'm working with really, really fatty bacon like this, I want to use it. I want to be using it in order to like capture all of that fat. So it has to be in a cold pan before we bring it up to temperature. Otherwise, what will happen is it will just start burning. So if you've ever had like rubbery bacon that's kind of like chewy, but like also cooked, it looks raw, but it's actually cooked. That happens when it burns, so that's burnt bacon, because it like wasn't introduced to a cold pan. So very, very often I see that come up on a lot of like griddle cooking, because in those griddles what they're doing is they're putting the bacon down on a griddle that has been going for like the whole day. So oftentimes when I come across that, that's what's happening, is it's burning or undercooking sometimes. Yeah. Oh yeah, Hermina, the sambal oelek. Yeah, maybe it's just me because I eat so much sambal oelek, but I actually don't think that sambal oelek is that spicy. So I use sambal oelek all the time in like high quantities. But definitely, if you are spice averse, it has quite a bit of heat too. So if you are averse to heat, definitely go easy on that sambal oelek because it is a hot sauce for sure. But that might just be because I've been like eating sambal oelek since I was a kid. That's a good point though. Yeah, when I says yeah, thank you, Paul, from a Euro POV. Yeah, when I say soy sauce, I'm generally mean light soy sauce, so probably sodium. You colloquially would refer to it as green cap soy sauce. So Kikkoman with the green cap, which is low sodium, so it has a little bit less salt in it. I find that it's really, really useful to cook with low sodium soy sauce because you can be a little bit more aggressive with the seasoning without like over seasoning and like overdoing it. So super often, a lot of my recipes, they'll call for 4 tablespoons of soy sauce. And if you find that it's too salty and you're using full sodium soy sauce, I would start by having that and using 2 tablespoons of full sodium soy sauce. So a couple of people have brought that up with me, so I do want to make sure and let people know if you are like following one of my recipes and notice that it's really, really salty, that's probably the very first thing that I would do is cut the soy sauce in half. Yeah. Cool. Alright, so you'll notice in my cast iron pan, as it slowly starts to come up to temperature, we're starting to get some liquid bacon fat going here. As this starts cooking, this will probably take maybe 5 minutes, maybe a little bit less than that. But as it starts cooking, we're going to end up with our like bits of bacon, which we're going to pull out. So we're going to have some solids that we're going to remove from the cast iron pan. And then we're going to have some liquids, which we're going to leave in the cast iron pan and sear in it. So we're going to remove those bacon solids, and then we're going to throw that into our wok fry. In the meantime, we're also going to be leaving the fat in the cast iron pan. And then what we're going to do is wok fry our fried rice and then put it back in the cast iron pan and sear in that bacon fat. And that's going to give us all of that bacony qualities. So like all of that really, really savory bacon quality. It's coming from that fat. Lots of people think that bacon fat or bacon, like the savory quality of bacon that you love, comes from the bacon bits, which is actually not true. That's not where the flavor of bacon comes from. It comes from fat. So if you've ever had like a really, really lean cut of bacon, probably doesn't taste like much because there's no fat in it. It's just like bacon solids. So. Oh, you didn't know there's a difference until pandemic cooking started. Yeah, that's totally true. This cooking show is definitely a pandemic cooking show. This is how it started. All right, that's looking good. So that will probably take another 2-3 minutes, maybe 5 minutes. We'll see how long. But we want that bring that cast iron temperature up pretty slowly in order to render out that fat. So it does take a little bit of time to render bacon fat, but it is super important in order to cook in it. Yeah, totally. Cool. Hello to everyone just tuning in. My name is Wesley. This is Woo Can Cook. If this is your first time catching one of these streams, we're here streaming every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday at 6:30, and Wednesdays at 6 p.m. PST. Today we're doing a cast iron pan fried rice that I'm doing with some bacon fat, which is what we're doing right now. This is one of my favorite ways of approaching a fried rice at home because it uses a cast iron pan, so it's probably one of my favorite ways of avoiding really mushy and porridgey fried rice. So if you've ever had a fried rice that's very like kind of reminds you of oatmeal, that comes from cooking in a wok that's too low in heat. So super often you will find that happening with fried rice because fried rice involves, as the name implies, a whole bunch of rice. So when you throw that much rice into a wok, a couple of things are going to happen, but the main thing that's going to happen is the temperature of the wok is going to drastically drop. So there are a few ways to work around that, but my favorite way of working around that is doing a good portion of the cook in a cast iron pan, and that's going to give us a nice crispy quality to our fried rice that you would otherwise not be able to get in a wok. So if you have any questions for me, feel free and drop your questions in the chat. I know I miss questions all the time, so if I missed something, feel free and repeat yourselves too. I know I miss stuff all the time. Yeah, or the other, yeah, so that's a good question, Sly Sister. The other big problem that lots of people will run into is if you're trying to do this with fresh rice. So over here, we can take a look. This is the rice that I'm going to be using today. So if you were tuned in yesterday, Slices, I know that you were here yesterday and we talked about this. Yesterday we made some kung pao chicken and we used this rice. This was the fresh rice from yesterday. So very, very specifically, anytime that you see me making a fried rice, it is generally following a day where I have made some kind of stir fry in which we used fresh rice. So today, the day after that, we have made a kung pao chicken stir fry. We're doing a fried rice because you can only make fried rice with leftover rice. You cannot make fried rice with fresh rice because fresh rice, as the name implies, is very, very fresh, which means that it's going to have a lot of steam and fluffiness to it. So that's a super, super useful, important quality that we look for in fresh rice when we're eating like stir fries and stuff, because we want that like really, really fluffy and steamy quality to our rice because it's really tasty. But in a fried rice, because we're going to be putting it in a cook, if it has all of that moisture in it still, what's going to happen is that moisture is going to mix into your stir fry, and then it's going to turn into porridge. So super, super important is that if you are making a fried rice, it has to be really, really dry. Otherwise, you're going to get yourself a mushy fried rice. All right. So our bacon is looking pretty good. I'm going to pull out my solids now. So what I'm going to do is I'm reserving all of the liquid here and then removing just the solids. So we want to leave that fat behind. So I'm tilting the pan away from me and then pulling out all of these solid bacon bits. This is tricky to do because cast iron pans are really heavy. So what you'll see is that left behind, we have all of this liquid bacon fat. So this is really, really important because this is what we're going to be using to sear in. So we're going to circle back around to that in a minute. But in the meantime, let's start cooking in a wok. So I'm setting my cast iron pan aside with the fat in it. We're going to circle back around to that in a moment. But in the meantime, what we're going to do is we're going to start wok cooking here. So I'm preheating my wok here. That wok is ice cold because it was not on a side burner. So I'm going to let that preheat. Yeah. Yeah, thanks, guys. Yeah, we don't. I don't cook the same thing. I probably cook the same like maybe like 25 to 30 things or so. Kind of goes back and forth. It usually depends on like what kind of things I want to eat during the week. I cook this fried rice a lot though, mostly because I like to cook fried rice the day after I do a stir fry. So yesterday we did a kung pao chicken, so today we're doing a fried rice. So very, very often you will see me scheduling fried rices the day after stir fries because it's probably my favorite way of making use of a leftover rice. So if I had done a stir fry today, I would probably be eating stale rice with my stir fry, which is probably fine. Like I can live with it. But if I have leftover rice, then I might as well make a fried rice. So. But yeah, that also brings me up to my next point, is that if you have noticed that I repeat lots of stuff, that's because most of the things that I'm cooking are things that are recipes that already live over on my YouTube channel. So if you haven't checked out what's going on over there, there's a whole bunch of recipes. I think there's we're coming up on the 50th recipe right now. Essentially what I've been doing is cooking my way through each of those recipes that I've been releasing. So if you're trying to figure out how to cook some of the things that I cook on these streams, that's a good place to go. Because in those recipe videos, they kind of tend to move a little bit slower. There's also a written version in those recipe videos, so you can follow along. And you don't have to reference this live stream in order to figure out how to cook what I'm cooking. So definitely, if you're watching over on Reddit and you haven't checked out the YouTube channel, highly recommend hopping over there and checking that stuff out. Lots of fun content going on, including new recipes. Those are coming out every Friday. So coming up this Friday is going to be a Japanese chicken katsu, which is super fun. And I've actually never worked with panko breadcrumb in that fashion before. I usually just use it in meatballs. So that one's going to be super fun. Last Friday we did a Taiwanese popcorn chicken, so I've been on a fried chicken kick lately. So Lots of stuff like that. If you're interested in checking content like that, definitely hop over. Lots of people just like to binge watch that stuff. I know people have been binge watching that series quite a bit. You could probably binge watch probably close to 3 hours of Woo Can Cook content now. So yeah, yeah, that chicken katsu turned out really good. That was like probably the most attention that I've ever paid towards plating, because especially like with Japanese dishes, like plating becomes really, really important because they're so minimalist. All right, so we're preheating our wok. If you're not sure if your wok is hot enough, what we want to see is this. We want all of this smoke to start bellowing off. If you don't see smoke, it means that your wok is not hot enough. So that means a couple of things. Number one, it means that your wok is nice and hot. But number two, what that also means is that make sure that your smoke detectors are turned off and all of your windows are open, because you're going to start gathering a lot of smoke in the house. So super, super important. Anytime that you're wok cooking, make sure that you open those windows up. All right, so today this is some grapeseed oil because I ran out of peanut oil. And in Chinese cooking, we call this a long yao, which is essentially coating the hot wok in cold oil. And that creates our non-stick surface. And we're starting off with our aromatics first. So this is my garlic, followed by my ginger, and the greens of my green onions. And then what we want to do is let this go for long enough until it's fragrant. Use your nose at this point, so start smelling when you start smelling garlic and ginger. You're in a good spot. Usually for me that's about 10 seconds, maybe a little bit longer. But at this point though, you definitely want to be using your nose. Smell. What do you smell? All right. Next up, I'm adding my chicken to the wok. Yeah. Oops. We're going to give that a couple seconds. We want that to flash cook on extremely high heat. And that's going to give us that like really, really crispy quality to our chicken. Super, super important. So if you want crispy wok fried chicken, it has to be done on high heat. So if we were to try to do this on medium to low heat, what you would end up with is pretty like mushy chicken. So in order to make sure that it's seared and nice and crispy, we need this wok to be ripping hot. While that's going, I'm going to get to my eggs, which I forgot to do. This is just 2 eggs that I'm whisking up. And what we're going to do is we're going to add this to our wok towards the middle. So we're going to add these eggs pretty early into the wok fry. And that's a quality that you'll find comes up in a lot of fried rice, is because what we're trying to do is develop nice curds of eggs. So super often you will hear me compare it to like a pad thai or a pad see ew, in which we add our egg element really, really late. So it's literally the very last thing that you add. And in those cases, what we're trying to do is coat everything in egg. So you get like nice egg-coated fried rice noodles, which is probably the quality that you'll associate with things like pad thai. In a fried rice, we want actually the exact opposite. So what we're looking for are like these large curds of eggs. So in order to do that, it has to go into the wok pretty early. So it has to go in before the rice enters. Otherwise, you're going to have egg-coated rice, which is not what we're after. So I compare it to doing exactly the opposite of what we would do in a pad thai. All right. I'm adding my carrots next, just because I want to give it a little bit of a head start. Carrots are pretty durable, which means that they take a little bit longer than you would expect to cook through. So I like to give it a little bit of a head start so that we get a little bit of a decent cook time on it before we move on and add our eggs. So Important thing to remember is that as soon as we add the egg elements to our fried rice, we're on the clock because eggs cook very, very quickly. So actually, anytime that you're cooking in a wok, you're already on the clock. But super, super important is that we want the primary elements of our fried rice to be already cooked through, like our chicken and our carrots, before we add those eggs, because otherwise you're going to end up with burnt eggs. Yes. Cool. All right. Ooh. Probably should have done this. One last thing that I'm going to do with my eggs, and this is probably something that you should do anytime that you're adding eggs to a wok, is I'm going to add a tiny bit of cornstarch. So that's maybe quarter teaspoon of cornstarch. And what that's going to do is it's going to give the eggs a little bit more time to cook in the wok. So if you've ever had a wok fried egg that's like a little bit chewy, that's coming from the fact that a wok is extremely hot and eggs cook extremely fast. So that cornstarch is going to give us a little bit more time to cook before the eggs start overcooking. So it sort of slows down the cook time a little bit. All right, so I'm moving everything to one side, and then we're going to add our eggs. And super, super important. So what we want to happen here is we want these eggs to set before we start combining, and that's going to create those nice curds of egg that you come across in fried rice a lot. We don't want to mix it before it starts setting, because otherwise you're going to end up with egg-coated chicken, which is not what we're after. We're trying to get some nice curds of egg, so we need this to set first. Alright, so that should take maybe 20 seconds, maybe a little bit longer than that. Depends how hot your wok is. But once you start seeing those eggs set, we can start mixing it and then letting it combine with the chicken. I'm going to give this a little bit longer. Now we can combine it. Yeah. So now we have those nice curds of egg, which is what we're looking for anytime that we're trying to create a nice eggs in our fried rice. Alright, so last up, I'm adding my rice to the wok. It is very, very stale, so that's super, super important. We have to have stale rice here. If you have fresh rice, so if you have fluffy rice, what's going to happen is you're going to be introducing a lot of moisture at this point. So, super, super important. The biggest enemy to wok frying is moisture. So anytime that you're cooking in a wok, the main thing that we're trying to work against is the development or accumulation of moisture in a wok cook. The more moisture that you have in a wok, the more temperature that you're going to start losing. And the lower the temperature of your wok, the more trouble you're going to have creating like nice, like crispy fried rice. Otherwise, we're going to end up with mushy fried rice. All right. So we can actually listen to here. So you'll notice that as soon as I added the rice to my wok, a couple of things happened, but the main thing that happened is all of the sizzling in my wok just disappeared. So you could stop and listen even. So it is still sizzling a little bit, but most of the sizzling, it has just disappeared, and that's quality. That's going to be a big problem if you're ever wok cooking, and you notice that happens while you still have things to cook. That's a big, big problem because it means that you're on your way to a mushy stir fry. In our case, it's totally okay because there's nothing left to cook. We've cooked everything. So our chicken is already cooked, our eggs are already cooked, everything is already cooked. Essentially, all we're doing is combining at this point, so we're not really running the risk of developing a mushy stir fry. But if you're still cooking and you notice that this is happening, that's a big problem, and you should stop what you're doing and let the wok heat up a little bit more before you start cooking again. So once that rice is nice and broken down, I'm going to start introducing my sauce here. And what I like doing, a couple of folks have asked about this too, but you'll notice that anytime that I'm working with a sauce, usually I only add maybe like the first half of it, sometimes even like the first third of it. But definitely I'm usually reserving at least like 30 to 40% of the sauce. So this is still probably about like maybe like 20% of the sauce is left. And the reason that I do that is to make sure that we don't over season. So depending on, like, especially in a fried rice, it depends on how much rice is in your fried rice. So this is actually quite a bit of rice, so we might actually need it. But super often I won't use all of that sauce. So in order to make sure that we don't over season, don't just dump it in. So if you just dump that sauce in, you could definitely over season if you're not careful. So what I like doing is add a little bit of it and then check, combine it. Let everything mix. You could even taste at this point. And if you need the rest of it, add it. But if you don't need it, don't add it. All right. And I think this might actually need all of it. Yeah, so we actually used quite a bit of rice today, so it might actually need all of this. But let's taste. That's my bacon solids going in last. Ooh, yeah, and that's pretty good already. Yeah, okay, so at this point, if you wanted, you could even just stop right now, and this would be fine. You could totally serve this, and it would probably be just fine. But a fun carrot on the top, or icing on the top, is to finish it in a cast iron pan. So I love finishing in my cast iron pan because it gives us the opportunity to develop a really nice crispy sear to a wok fry. So if you wanted, you could totally pull this out and just start eating. And this is a totally acceptable way of eating a fried rice. But for bonus points, what I'm doing is I'm adding this back to my wok, or to my cast iron, where we have all of the liquid fat from our bacon still. And what I'm going to do is we're going to let this set, and then as that cast iron pan, it's going to come back up to temperature. And then what we're going to do is we're going to sear the bottom of our fried rice. And that's going to give us that nice crispy quality to our fried rice that sears up, and that's going to be the final thing that we eat. All right, so for a good sear, you need at least 2 minutes. So I like to land somewhere in between 2 to 3 minutes. So you'll probably start panicking right around, if you're like me, right around 1.5 minutes, maybe 2 minutes. You're probably going to start wondering if you're burning the rice, which technically you are. Anytime that you're searing something, essentially what you're doing is burning it. But it's going to be really tasty, and that's going to be where all of the crispiness of your fried rice is going to come from. Oh yeah, exotic structure. I live in Oakland, so that's actually one of the series that I do on the YouTube channel, is a series where we reproduce a lot of foods from the Oakland, like Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area. So a lot of stuff from Chinatown in Oakland, a lot of stuff from San Francisco and like Chinatown in San Francisco too. So that's one of my favorite things to do because it's a really fun way of like supporting the local economy here in town. Chef Elzar, yeah, exactly. I guess that's like a, oh man, that's a good reference. I haven't watched Futurama in a little while. Chef Elzar. Yeah, exactly though. Oh, what's in the sauce? Oh yeah, Loan, something like that. It's a fun username. What's in the sauce? So today we added, that was a combination of soy sauce, sambal oelek, and hoisin sauce. That's probably what's in the written recipe. Today I also added, I was going a little bit off book, and added a little bit of rice vinegar, and we added a little bit of lao gan ma, which is like chili oil, like chili oil crisp. You don't have to have that. If you don't have lao gan ma, you don't have to add it. I just happen to have a little bit left over, so I kind of just threw it in. Yeah, higher living. Yeah, exactly. Aren't you supposed to use day-old rice? Yeah. So this is the rice that we're using is from yesterday's stream. So it was, it's a full day old, and it's been sitting out for maybe the last like 3-4 hours. So this is very cold. If that was rice that we were actually just trying to eat, it would be pretty gross because it would be pretty stale. It's like kind of crunchy almost. But since it's really dried out like that, it makes for really, really great fried rice, especially when you combine it with bacon fat, like what we're doing right now. Cool. Ooh, this type of food in New York City, Chinatown. Yeah, I've never actually eaten Chinese food in New York City, so that's a good question. I don't know. All right, so we're coming up on 3 minutes. We're at 2 minutes and 50 seconds. So for you're like me, this is right around the time where I start wondering if that fried rice is burning, which technically it is, but it is also going to give us all of that crispy quality to it. So not quite. I'm going to let that go for a little bit longer. Don't start getting too anxious. If you move it too early, it won't sear, so we want to give it a full 3 minutes. And I just started moving it, and it was not quite ready yet, so I'm going to leave it and give it another. Let's give it another minute, and that's going to help us get that nice sear. I think my suspicion is that the reason that it's not seared yet is because the cast iron pan was pretty cold when we put the fried rice in. Yeah, non-Asian grocery stores. Yeah, most of the things that I've got that I'm using today are things that are pretty readily available. Definitely soy sauce. Definitely hoisin sauce. I think is pretty easy to find. In most like standard grocery stores, you can find hoisin sauce. Sesame oil you can definitely find. Rice vinegar is probably a little tricky, but you mostly find it. Also, if you can't find rice vinegar, you can either substitute it with distilled white vinegar or just leave it out, and it will be fine. Probably the trickiest thing is going to be sambal olek, but at least here in California, it's pretty easy to locate. All right, let's have a look. There we go. So, as I'm moving my fried rice, you can see a big chunk of it here. We have all of this nice crisping, all of this blackened bits. So some people might refer to that as being burned. I refer to it as nice crispy quality, and that's going to give us that nice like crunchy quality to our fried rice that we're looking for. And basically anything that was in contact with the bottom of the pan is going to have that crispy quality to it. Right. So the very, very last thing that I'm going to add is our frozen peas. I mentioned this earlier, but these have to be extremely frozen because they need to defrost in the pan. So if you add canned peas at this point, what you're going to end up with is like mushy peas, so like mushy and probably a little bit overcooked. So I'm adding frozen peas here, and then I'm just going to let these sort of combine. This gets a little bit tricky. I probably should have done this while it was still in the wok, because combining in a cast iron pan when it's really full is tricky. And that is about it. Yeah. Ooh, poutine, yeah. I haven't had poutine since I was in Canada. Poutine is, like, real poutine is hard to find here in the States. Usually when you find poutine out here, it's, like, not poutine. It's just fries with cheese on it. Sometimes it's not even made with cheese curds, which is really frustrating to me, because that's not what poutine is. Yeah, very often when you come across poutine in the States, it's essentially just cheese fries. So if you've done this properly, and if you've done your cast iron seasoning properly, everything should have just come right off. So you could take a look at my cast iron right now, which is nice and seasoned. There's not really anything left on it. Everything just came right off because we have that nice non-stick surface. So super important, this is true for both woks and cast iron pans, is that we want to start cleaning both of these right after you finish removing stuff from it. So while the pan is still hot, give it a rinse and everything will come right off. So you'll notice that my cast iron pan is almost completely clean. That's because it has a nice non-stick surface while it's hot. If you let it cool down and then try and clean it, what you're going to end up with is a bunch of stuff stuck, which is not good. All right, so we're going to do the same thing for both our cast iron pan and our wok. I'm giving the pan a good coat in a little bit of vegetable oil, and that's just going to prevent any kind of oxidation or rusting. And that's it for the cast iron. And then I'm going to do the same thing for my wok here. I've had this on my side burner, so it is still quite hot. And just like I did with my cast iron pan, I'm giving this a rinse and then giving it a wipe down. And same thing, I'm going to give it a little bit of oil. No more than like a teaspoon, maybe even a little bit less than that. And then we're just going to coat everything in that oil, and that's going to make sure that nothing starts oxidizing or rusting. And that's it. Cool. So we could take a look. What we're looking for here in our crispy fried rice is a couple of things, but most specifically what we're looking for when we crisp up a fried rice are things like this. So we have all of this nice browning and like crispiness. So some people, you might refer to this as being burned, but I actually think that's where all of the crispy flavor is going to come from. So that's probably, in my opinion, the most delicious part is when things sear like that. So you'll see a similar thing. We do a similar thing with anything else that's seared. So things like seared steaks. So you do the same thing with your New York strip steaks, ribeye steaks, pork chops. All of those have a similar process in which we're searing it on the exterior to develop a nice crispy exterior, and then finishing it with a baste. So similar process to a pan-seared steak. All right. Let's give this a taste. Yeah, super tasty. My favorite quality about this fried rice, though, is that it is not at all mushy, so it is exactly the opposite. It's very crisp. It has a really interesting and like depth of flavor that kind of pervades throughout the whole dish. I think that lao genma is doing a lot of work because of the chili oil, so that oily quality of that hot sauce kind of like covers the whole dish in it. So super often that's a quality that I come across in a lot of fried rices, is that certain parts of the fried rice will be flavored. So like the chicken might be really tasty, but the rice itself is not actually that tasty because it's not really seasoned super well. So super often, like, I actually think this is a big quality about the Panda Express fried rice, is that the Panda Express fried rice doesn't taste like anything. It's really just like, you very often might order the Panda Express fried rice and then eat it with the sesame chicken as like rice, which is not what it's supposed to taste like. It's actually supposed to have flavor to it. So I love this fried rice because it has an actual like real depth of flavor and quality to it that like totally stands on its own. Also, one of my favorite ways of approaching a fried rice is in that cast iron pan. Essentially what we did is we finished the cook time in our cast iron pan, and that gave us that nice crispy quality to it. So at one point I did actually stop and say that you can just pull this out and eat it as a wok fried rice, which is totally acceptable. But because we crisped it up in that pan fry at the very end, it did a couple of things. The main thing that it did is gave us that nice crispy exterior. That was also the point where we started incorporating all of our bacon fat. So that's going to give us a nice like rich quality from our bacon fat. So super useful. If you're working with thick cut bacon, you can use all of that fat, which is where all of the flavor is going to come from. So Yeah, shoveling. Yeah. I'm glad that people remember that. Yeah, so I started mentioning this on a couple of streams now, but super often people have been asking me about how to eat with chopsticks. So it's super useful to keep in mind. And I noticed this a lot. I have a lot of friends that eat like dim sum, and they like don't understand how to eat with chopsticks with such dexterity. The way that Chinese people do it, it doesn't actually involve using the chopsticks like you normally would, but really normal, typical is you will see Chinese people pick up the bowl and then eat this way. So I refer to this as shoveling food into your face. Chinese people will very often do that and pick up the bowl, move it to your face, and then use the chopsticks to move food into your face, which allows you to eat a little bit faster. And that's why Chinese people use rice bowls. So you will never see a Chinese person eat food off of a flat plate, because it's really hard to pick up food with chopsticks off a flat plate. You definitely cannot eat really fast doing that. So very often, if you watch a Chinese person eating, they might see like food prepped on the flat plate. So you'll like eat family style and put stuff onto the flat plate and then move it into the rice bowl from there. And that's so that you can eat from the rice bowl and like put it to your face and shovel food into your mouth. Yeah. Good question though. Yeah, I love that people remember that. What am I using to wipe down the cast iron skillet and wok? Yeah, so that was a little bit of grapeseed oil. I usually like doing that with peanut oil, but I ran out of peanut oil. And then it was just a paper towel, so anything that's clean. Give it a wipe down. The first thing that we want to do is give it a rinse. I think the rinse is the most important part, because if your wok and your cast iron pans have a nice non-stick seasoning going, all of that stuff is going to come right off as soon as you rinse it. And then once you rinse it, there shouldn't be too much left behind. But if something is stuck behind, usually what I like doing, this actually happened with the wok today, a couple of things stuck, is I like giving it a good scrape with the flat side of a wooden utensil. So I used my wooden spatula, and that just kind of removes anything that's still stuck. And then I like giving it a coat of oil with the dry paper towel, and that's just going to keep it from oxidizing. Yeah, shoveling is your way to go now. Yeah, that's totally, that's the true Chinese way of eating rice. Cool. Yeah, poutine. Oh yeah, poutine is bae. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I have not had real poutine since the last time I was in Canada, which I think was in like 2016 or so. Yeah, for some reason I cannot find true poutine. I also, to be honest, I have not actually come across cheese curds. Period. So that might actually be a thing. I don't think that you can actually find cheese curds in California. Maybe that's a thing. Maybe that's why you can't find poutine. Yeah, am I from the West Coast? Yeah, so I'm located here in Oakland, so we're Oakland, California, so Northern California. Yeah. Cool. Yeah, thanks everyone. All right, thanks everyone for tuning in. My name is Wesley. This is Woo Can Cook. If you haven't hopped over to the YouTube channel yet, definitely hop over and check out that stuff. Lots of fun stuff going on over there. We're working our way to 2,700 subscribers by the end of the month, which I'm pretty sure we'll hit. But if you want to help us hit that subscriber goal, hop over and check out what's going on over there. Lots of fun content coming up over there, in addition to the live stream, which we do over here. So that would be the computer behind me. There's also a whole list of everything that I'm going to be cooking on live stream coming up. So you can find out everything. If you want to know what I'm going to be cooking in the next, I think it goes out like 3 weeks now, you can look up what's going to be cooking. And if you're really committed, you can check out the ingredient list for some of those things and pick up the ingredients that you need to cook along with me, which I know lots of people have started doing. Especially with the really simple ones like these fried rices. Most of the things in these fried rices you could pick up you could pick up at like Safeway or Albertsons or something. There were not too many specialty ingredients. Probably the most specialty thing that we used was sambal olek. But otherwise, most of the things that we used are pretty easy to find. So if you want, you can look up what we're cooking next and check out some of that stuff. I actually don't remember what I'm cooking next. Let's look that up. I should probably make a better habit of finding out what I'm cooking next. Oh yeah, next up tomorrow we're making mapo tofu, which is one of my favorites. That one's actually super simple too. So if you want to check out what's coming up next, definitely hop over to YouTube and check out that schedule. Lots of fun stuff like that coming up. That's also where all of the recipe videos live. So every Friday we have a new recipe video that pops up over on YouTube. Last Friday we did the Taiwanese popcorn chicken that came from Quickly, so I did a fun Quickly's hack. That's like a boba and snack shop here in the States. And then next Friday, or this Friday coming up, is going to be some chicken katsu, which is going to be super fun, which I've never actually done before. I've never worked with panko breadcrumb in that fashion. Usually I just use it in meatballs and stuff. So that was a super fun one to do. So we've been doing a lot of fried chicken lately. So if you're interested in stuff like that, definitely hop over to YouTube. We have a couple of series that are going on right now. My favorite one, probably the one that lots of people love right now, is the Chinese American food hack series, which I've been doing a lot of stuff from, like Panda Express and Kung Pao chicken, General Tso's chicken, things like that. We just did the Mongolian beef from P.F. Chang's, which is super fun. And in those recipes, usually what I'm doing is deconstructing some of these like really, really iconically American Chinese food and taking a look at what about those things are really American and what those dishes would look like if they weren't so American. So what does it look like if you were to try and reassemble General Tso's chicken in the lens of like traditional wok cooking? And that's really interesting to do because a lot of those dishes are not Chinese at all. Like General Tso's chicken doesn't really come from Chinese cooking, it just comes from American cooking. It's really just American fried chicken. So stuff like that all lives over on the YouTube channel. We have another series that's dedicated to just foods from TV and film. And then there's a really fun one that I've been doing where I've been reproducing a lot of foods from like local Bay Area restaurants. So the most recent one I did, we got the chow fun from Shandong is coming up very soon. I think that's coming up in 2 weeks. So lots of stuff like that. Lots of restaurants around the Oakland, San Francisco Bay Area. So if you're local to the Bay Area, that's a fun one to check out too. So cool. Thank you all for tuning in. If you haven't yet, hop over to YouTube, check out that stuff. We're working our way to 2,700 subs by the end of the month. So if you want to help us hit it, definitely hop over and subscribe. If you're not interested, please don't subscribe. Lots of people subscribe and aren't interested. I don't know why you're doing that. This is probably just going to end standing you. So cool. Yeah. Yeah, potato, and that is a good question. How do people from Quebec feel about not using cheese curds, but just like normal mozzarella cheese? And I don't understand why. The only thing that I can guess is that maybe the reason that people are doing that is because you can't find cheese curds. But I have no idea why you would use mozzarella in poutine, because it would just melt and you're not going to get cheese curds. Yeah. Anyway, here in the States, that's probably the one that you'll find the most. Matt, hey, how's it going? Augie, oh, good. That's a good tip. Matt, so Matt Gerling is a friend of mine, and he says poutine in Berkeley at Augie's is a good spot. I've never actually been there, but I've been really frustrated with the cheese poutine that I've found around California, so I'm going to check that out. The last time I had actual real poutine was in Vancouver, which is actually not even where poutine comes from. So anyway, yeah. Cool. Thanks, everyone. I'll be back tomorrow. We're going to be cooking some mapo tofu. We'll be back at 6 o'clock PST tomorrow. So if you want to check that out, I'll hop back and check that out. Yeah, check out the recipes, and I'll see you soon. I'll be around doing some dishes, so if you have any questions, if I missed anything, feel free and repeat yourself. I know I looked away, and a lot of people said stuff, so I probably missed something. So cool. All right, I'll see y'all soon. Bye.
Slow. Come over and start up a conversation with just me, and trust me, I'll give it a chance. Now take my hand, stop and the man on the jukebox, and then we start to dance. And now I'm singing like, girl, you know I want your love. Your love was handmade for somebody like me. Well, come on now, follow my lead. I may be crazy, don't mind me. Say, boy, let's not talk too much. Grab on my waist and put that body on me. Well, come on now, follow my lead. Come on now, follow my lead. I'm in love with the shape of you. We push and pull like a magnet do. Although my heart is falling too. I'm in love with your body. Last night you were in my room, and now my bedsheets smell like you. Every day discovering something brand new. I'm in love with your body. I'm in love with your body. I'm in love with your body. the shape of you. One weekend, we let the story begin. We're going out on our first date. You and me are thrifty, so go all you can eat. Fill up your bag and I fill up your plate. We talk for hours and hours about the sweet and the sour and how your family's doing okay. And leaving, getting a taxi, kissing the backseat, tell the driver make the radio play. And I'm singing like, girl, you know I want your love. Your love was handmade for somebody like me. Come on now, follow my lead. I may be crazy, don't mind me. Say, boy, let's not talk too much. Grab on my waist and put that body on me. Come on now, follow my lead. Come on now, follow my lead. I'm in love with the shape of you. Push and pull like a magnet do. Although my heart is falling too. I'm in love with your body. Last night you were in my room. Now my bedsheets smell like you. Every day discovering something brand new. I'm in love with your body. 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 Every day discovering something brand new. I'm in love with the shape of you. Come on, be my baby. Come on. 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 Come on, be my baby. Come on.
Think I'll dust them off, put them back up on the shelf. In case my little baby girl is in need. Am I coming out of that